Kia ora, bula, kia rana, talofa malaelele, and welcome to Tupalangi and a Peace and Easy Pod. My name's Glenn Murphy, here on Waiheke Island, my own little Pacific place, and great to be here with you for another week, Dave.
Indeed it is, Glenn, and kia ora and bula vinaka, and I suppose g'day. It's David Dewar here, ordinarily based in Rarotonga, previously based in Suva, which is where I've been this week, and having just arrived in Adelaide, I thought I'd add the Aussie g'day as well. So I'll be based in Adelaide for the next 5 days, but it's been a bit of a tour around the Pacific for our family this week, but great to be back on the pod. For our regular listeners, you'll know that I've been working with Glenn for the last 5 years, helping New Zealand, Australian and Pacific businesses understand this incredible part of the world, and it's fantastic to keep doing that through this weekly podcast.
And in this episode, we took advantage of Dave's travels. While he was in Fiji, he sat down in person with Atin Patel from the Vinod Patel Group to learn about their business and what they're all about. We had a great conversation with Atin, and we look forward to playing that in a minute. But first of all, Dave, with all the travels, do you want to give us a bit of a download about who you've seen, what you've done? What was it like being back in Suva?
It was awesome being back in Suva, Glenn. I think one of those places that it's not really renowned as the tourism destination of the Pacific, but for those who live there, you really grow very fond of it, and it was a great reminder as to why that was. And I think for me, really Suva boils down to just an incredible group of people that I was privileged to work with, to work alongside, and to be very good friends and family with, I suppose, over the last 5 years. And happily, we got to catch up with a lot of those people. So I spent a couple of days, I should say, in the office. We had a great webinar on a Tuvalu coastal resilience project, which is quite a big infrastructure project that's coming up for tender in a few months. And so really good to connect with a whole range of different people from the ADB and various others associated with that. But of course also to catch up with the great team at the New Zealand High Commission in Suva. We spent a couple of days just wandering around, having a few meetings with people. We had our record with Atin, who, in addition to being a great contact and someone who we've done a lot of business with, is also a very good family and personal friend. And in fact, after we did our recording, we went round as a family to Atin's house for dinner that night, and he and Neddy, his wife, and Kahil and Denisa, their kids, were very, very generous in hosting us for a wonderful dinner at their house, and so it was great to catch up with them. As is always the case, you never get to see as many people as you'd hope to. I ran into a few people, some of whom knew that I was going to be there that week, and others were, I hope, pleasantly surprised to see me kind of on the street a little bit randomly, and some, sadly, I wasn't able to catch up with at all. We sort of exchanged a few messages, tried to make something work, but unfortunately it didn't. My apologies to everyone listening in who may or may not have known that I was going to be back in Suva.
Cool, Dave. And then you managed to have a little bit of a holiday as well. And where were you again? What was the name of the island you went to?
We did. We had a fantastic little holiday. So people who have lived in Suva or have visited Suva may be aware of an island resort called Laluvia. Laluvia is probably one of the more, I guess, budget-friendly resorts off the coast of Suva. You drive up past Nassori, which is it's another city really, but it's attached to very close to Suva, which is where the main airport for Suva is located, out to the northeast of the Suva Peninsula. And you drive through there and up to a very historically famous spot called Bow Landing. And that's where a river mouth comes out, and you go out past the island of Bow. And the island of Bow is a very, very famous historical spot in Fiji, which is where the traditional kind of paramount chief of the Atoke people, the Vunivalu of Bow, is located, and all of the chiefly families have a connection to Bow Island, and it's a very special place. And then you head out for another probably half an hour, and you arrive at the beautiful island of Laluvia, which is it's got a collection of bures on it, probably about 25 individual bures and a big communal eating area. And on a nice day, I'm biased, but I think it's one of the most beautiful islands you can get in Fiji. It's white sands, it's coconut trees, it's some stunning snorkeling. And diving and even fishing around there, and one of those parts of the country that's not all that well visited, but certainly a place that I'd recommend to anyone who's coming near Suva. very, very close to another island, the island resort of Tombarua, which is owned by a friend of the show, Glenn Inga, from New Zealand, and his wife, who've had that property for a long time. And that's probably a little bit more upmarket, but Laluvia is definitely a place where you can sort of let your kids run wild and, everyone play to their heart's content. And that's certainly what we did while we were over there.
And Dave, while you were travelling around the world and swatting yourself on tropical islands, I was struggling up the Sky Tower in Auckland, supporting a good cause. One of our colleagues and friends, Kate, her dad is currently battling with cancer, and so we went out as a team and climbed up the Sky Tower for the annual blood cancer charity race, or I don't know if it's really a race, but I think it's just a goal to actually climb up the 1,000 and something odd stairs that you climb to get up to the top of the Sky Tower. So the good news is I made it. I could still walk when I got to the top and lived to tell the tale. So done, and managed to raise a bit of money along the way.
Yeah, well done, and what a great cause. And you're looking remarkably fresh for someone who has climbed I think it is, the tallest structure in the Southern Hemisphere, or certainly close to it.
I think so, yeah. And it
certainly felt like that, I suppose, when you got to the top.
It sure did, yeah. No, there was a bit of burn going on, but I slept well last night anyway. Dave, should we go into the Talanoa with Atin?
As I mentioned earlier, Atin has been a good friend, a good personal friend for many years. He was actually our neighbour, in fact, for much of the time that we were living in Suva, and we've shared a lot of close family times together, and so it was fantastic to be able to sit down with him and talk a little bit about the Vinod Patel business. I used to describe it sort of semi-flippantly as the Bunnings of Fiji. In fact, it's kind of like a cross between a Bunnings and a Harvey Norman, as Atin was saying, because they have a very wide range of business interests, all the way from hardware through to homeware and several other businesses in between. And also, of course, not just in Fiji, but a reasonably thriving operation across the Pacific, with investments historically in New Zealand and certainly today in Australia and Timor-Leste and back into Papua New Guinea. The other key thing about it is, of course, that it's a family business, and it's named after the principal founder, Vinod Patel himself, the late Vinod Patel, I should say. He sadly passed away a couple of years ago, and Atin, one of the nephews of Vinod Patel and one of now the current directors of the business, was very generous with his time to talk about just how that business operates. All right. Well, in last week's show, I let our listeners know that I would be traveling this week to Fiji. And it's been fantastic to be back in Suva, a place that's very dear to my heart. And, where both myself and Glenn have spent a bit of time, but certainly I lived here for 6 years. And one of the real pleasures has been to catch up with some old friends. And it's fantastic to be sitting today in the support office for Fiji business Vinod Patel Group. And Vinod Patel is a brand and a name that will be very, very well known to anyone that's spent time in Fiji. And it's a real pleasure to be joined by a long-time friend of mine and great friend of the show and avid listener to the Tupalangi podcast, and that is Atin Patel, who's one of the directors here at Vinod Patel Group, and of course part of the family that runs this very long multi-generational business here. So Atin, thank you very much for having us in your wonderful office, and welcome to the Tupalangi pod.
Thank you for having me. Wonderful to kind of meet Glenn online and you physically here. Excellent.
Yeah, welcome, Atin. Great to meet you online.
So, as you'll know, Atin, from being a long-time listener to the show, the way we usually like to kick these Talanoa off is by inviting our guests to just tell us a little bit about themselves, how they came to be in the role that they are and in the business that they operate.
Thank you. So I was born in Ba, and that's where the family business started. You can see the founder, my uncle Vinod, right here. So I grew up pretty much in Ba, and then I did some schooling in India as well in primary years. Yeah. And then teenage years pretty much moved to New Zealand, and I was in boarding school in King's College, enrolled into University of Auckland Engineering School. I worked in Pacific Steel in Otahu in Auckland. Did the whole graveyard shift, wearing overalls, was a test technician. Sometimes your shifts are 11 to 3, 3 to 7. We were always told by the family that, one day you should come and join the family business. So that was always there. And it was good to have outside experience. Sometime late in 2003, I got the call from my uncles, and my dad said, look,
Now's the time.
Enough of this. Get back to Fiji. And so I came over here. There was not much engineering related work to do because, you come into the business and then you try to find what's of interest to you. So I started first with my uncle Jiten, who was the managing director at that time. And he was overseeing all the buying function, so procurement and understanding of products. And that was the heartbeat of the business generally. And I'm talking about the retail Vinod Patel business.
Mm.
But within a year, there were like other projects going on in the business where we were looking at improving our business systems. So then suddenly I found myself going into demonstrations of vendors, IT vendors, selling business systems, ERP systems. And then just by getting involved, suddenly I was overseeing the implementation of IT project. And at that time, I have some couple of funny stories about that actually. I had to teach everyone how to use a computer. There was one lesson actually that was really is kept with me for years. Said, okay, everyone, this class started. Okay, point the mouse to the center of the screen. One guy picks up the mouse and points it to the center of the screen.
Well,
like,
that was your instruction.
I said, I have a very long work cut out for me. So I got very much 5 years doing ERP implementation, get the business systems going. In the process, I learned pretty much from, what the truck driver does in the yard to what accounts team are doing. So I got a very good cross section of the business and understanding. Then after that, I went back to New Zealand, and then we already had like a trading distribution business over there, which was also doing export. So for about 5-6 years, I was there overseeing that. And then after that stint, I got the call again in 2013 that we need someone to oversee all our manufacturing businesses, which is generally in the Western division of Fiji. And plus there was another new business we were setting up at the time. So it was a combination of that. And because I had the engineering background, manufacturing background as well, so I just got that portfolio. So that's me in a nutshell. And then later on, I got to oversee the export portfolio. So I was traveling to Tuvalu, Kiribati, Tonga, Samoa, Vanuatu, all these places, because Vinod Patel exports a lot to those kind of countries. But at the same time, I'm the director overseeing our gas business, Oceania Gas. And also we have a fastenings and nails business in Ba, which is Ba Industries. So I also oversee that.
I think that's a really good point because people listening to this will be picking up, I guess, a bit of the breadth of the operation that Vinod Patel Group oversees. So, do you want to just talk us through a little bit about what the shape of Vinod Patel as a business looks like?
Dave, before we go there, can I just say that explains quite a lot because when I went onto the website earlier this morning, Atin, I noticed in the leadership group that you're one of the leaders who doesn't have a title listed on the website. And now I understand it's because you're kind of doing too much to be wrapped up in one title.
I don't know what kind of business card to carry, What's the title on the business card? So nothing. So our main business is the Vinod Patel Retail, which has a secondary business, which now is standing on its own. It's called Home and Living. And then we have the finance business, which is Finance Hub, which does hire purchase. So all of that combined creates a Vinod Patel Retail vertical. And then we have manufacturing businesses that we started, as early as 1970s. Two of my uncles, the two founding directors, they started Ba Industries when there was a hurricane in Fiji and there was a shortage of fastenings and nails and all that. We went into making steel pipes and roofing. Then that got expanded into PVC pipes and electrical conduits. The steel business expanded into making prefabricated steel structure, light gauge steel structure houses. So then And then the other businesses that like, for example, Oceania Gas came through acquisitions. We do have other business which does in like all the furniture making, cabinetry. We even do lift and escalator installations within that same business. Then we have the investment arm where we have joint ventured with the likes of Fijian Holdings. We have Fiji Cement. And then we have Basic Industries where we are also joint venture partners, which has verticals like Humes, which does concrete culverts, blocks. We have standard concrete. And then they have quarry as well.
So very, very big presence in Fiji, but you also have offshore businesses as well, don't you?
We have 2 branches in Timor-Leste, which is under the Vinod Patel banner. And in Australia, we have a completely separate business which does steel cut and bend business and manufactures mesh. We are over 4 states now.
One of my observations about Fiji is how, certainly in the retail sector, things have been modernizing quite rapidly. And, thinking about home and living and how people are changing their lifestyles. What's your observation about that business?
This is exactly what we need to study. 10 years ago, the market segment was different. They had a different taste, even from furniture. Fiji has a taste where it has to be loud and bright. So you see some of the furnitures which are, but now actually, if you look at it now, it's quite modern taste. I suppose the generation which is now coming in, who are now the professionals who are wanting furnitures or appliances, they are more savvy, they have a modern taste. So, and they're well traveled. A lot of the Australia and New Zealand flavors are coming in now. Our product range keeps evolving. We do yearly reviews. Home and Living's managed completely separately with the management structure, and the hardware has a completely separate management structure. But also at the same time, there's a lot of synchronization happening in terms of product selection, procurement, market understanding, all of that.
If I just think, off the top of my head about the number of business verticals that you've talked about, the number of SKUs you must be dealing with across the group, how many people have you got working on all of this sort of stuff?
In terms of like the entire organization, I think we would probably be having about 1,800 personnel, not including the joint venture businesses. The number of SKUs we deal with generally, if you combine the hardware and the home and living business, we deal with about 15,000 SKUs.
Wow.
And so to help with ensuring that, we have the right amount of stock at the right price at the right time and distribute it into multiple stores, there's a fairly complex process. Every township in Fiji is different. They have a different size of store. So we have a process where we will do range planning as per the market, as per the store size. And then on top of that, replenishment. So we have systems that help us to forecast and replenish stock. 80% of the SKUs are imported. We generally have to be very much switched on with ensuring the shipments and all of the order processing and everything's actually quite on the ball.
I remember you telling me once about like even your trucking fleet. You're running one of Fiji's, if not the largest trucking fleet in the country, because you're doing sort of that as part of your in-house logistics fulfillment. So is there kind of a point where you reach that economy of scale where it just makes more sense to do it internally, or has that always been part of the strategy from the get-go?
To ensure that we do everything that suits the business requirements, we try to keep a lot of things under control within ourselves. A lot of things actually are internally controlled. Fleets are managed within our own fleet department. Now we are using a lot of technology. So using AI, I've tried to profile every branch with every demographics of the township. And then, using that smarts to kind of see if we can test whether we can improve the business. So we are very much for technology and ensure that we are ahead of the game.
It's obviously a family business. How does that work kind of at a governance level, thinking about your own relationship with your cousins and your uncles and that sort of thing?
I think the key is actually to have a very professional structure and demarcation of the job roles like you'd be working anywhere else. So in one business, let's say I'm reporting to my cousin. In the other business, we're working side by side as directors. We just have to kind of keep it very clean in terms of dealing professionally on the job roles. There is a large element of being a family business. If you have sometimes a meeting which is a family meeting, then it's like a, it's a
a bit of
fish
business and a
market.
bit of family.
It can be a fish market, but then you do have these organized executive boards, and so there are external directors who kind of keep that level of professionalism. So that helps a lot. And then you have a job role, and there's an expectation that you need to perform. So we have our KPIs, we have our performance related measures as well.
Yeah, I think I've definitely been
Hey-
struck by the discipline of the business, really. I think, that's been one of the hallmarks of, a little bit of a privileged inside look that I've had to Vinod Patel. I think the success probably speaks for itself as well.
I just wanted to add one thing. So, I mean, if you look at that, our company profile. So,
Which we have in
With-
front of us.
yeah.
Here we
So, my uncle, the founder, Vinod, like his number one thing actually was unity in the family. So the unity is actually the key thing that he always advocated. And I think that's the secret behind it.
I'll tell a story. When I first met Atin, we were all
Yeah.
on Castaway Island in the Mamanutha group. I met one of Atin's cousins, Rahul, who is now the CEO of Vinod Patel Group. And he mentioned that he had a cousin who was coming because they were celebrating, I think, the 80th birthday of one of your uncles. And this cousin was having to pick up a couple of cakes on the way. And there was some argument about having to do that. But Atin was that cousin, which was a good insight into the dynamics of the business at the time.
Tim, there are a couple of things that I noticed on your website that I was particularly curious about. And one was you really emphasized the green office policies. And the second thing I was interested in your comments on was in your news section, there was a real emphasis on a female-led branch opening up.
In terms of gender balance, I mean, we're in like a building supplies industry, right? So naturally, there's a lot of male dominance from that sector. But over the last few years, we've been conscious about ensuring that we give equality. In fact, a lot of the recent branch managers actually are female. In fact, to the board level, there is a good reporting on actually recruitments, gender balance. So it's not just financials, as a whole lot of other things that ensures that the business actually from a all round, in all the perspectives are covered. With the environmental side of things, we have initiated the ESG department. So yeah, there's a lot of initiatives with the green. I mean, to the extent even we ask the suppliers, hey, what type of initiatives you guys are doing.
And
Yeah.
Fiji, I suppose,
Yeah.
doesn't really have a regulatory requirement for a lot of that, right? So that's something that you're getting out ahead of, or, that's proactive policy from the business?
We try to like measure ourselves with the other developed nations' businesses. Also, exporters, and we have trading partners outside of Fiji. So we are also seen from that perspective that how are we seen
in terms of the other countries and particularly around the Pacific. I wonder how you view that.
So to be in the Pacific, these are all small nations, right? A lot of things are done at a personal level. So even with my portfolio, when I was looking after manufacturing, I was export bound. I had to, and at the same time, then when I came to Vinod Patel Retail, I was overseeing export business for about 4 years. So they gave me a very good understanding of actually the first thing actually was that, it's all about people in the relationship. You could the strategy I normally take actually is that you're not there to do business. In fact, you just go there for relationship building and business will follow. And getting involved in like a lot of these conferences, which are like, for example, like the Pacific water and wastewater conferences. Those are the biggest thing, like you networking, knowing people and all of that. And certainly this podcast helps a lot, by the way. It's a very good podcast.
Thank you. I won't edit
Thanks
that
for the
one out.
plug. We're talking to Atin Patel, who's one of the directors of the Vinod Patel Group, which of course is very well known in Fiji, talking about the importance of human connection and personal relationships. I've done a couple of trips back from the West. Atin's been kind enough to give me a lift, but the trip takes a lot longer. This is my tip. Atin ever offers you a lift back from the west, plan on it being at least sort of 8 rather than the usual 4 hours, because you have to stop at about 3 different employees' houses along the way and catch up with them and visit the auntie and drop off some fish or chicken. And I think, at a business the size that you've mentioned, 1,800 employees, but there's a fair chance that you'd know a fair few of those, I would say, personally.
At the same time, we also do a lot of official Talanoa sessions with Fiji-wide, branch-wide, and most of the executive management, like Rahul, CEO, and some of the directors and all of us participate in it. And then there's a lot of offline engagement as well, like our team members will be like going for, their weddings or in the families. So that's a very important part, obviously, being part of Vinod Patel Group.
It's not just a day job.
No, and I see in your structure as well that you also have the Vinod Patel Foundation giving back into community.
That was started by the founding director, late Mr. Vinod Patel. And it is a very crucial component of our group. We are still developing that into it becoming a much larger and recognized contributor.
And I guess thinking also about the engagement that you have across the region, you'd obviously be a pretty critical touch point for a lot of New Zealand and Australian businesses that are coming in. What sort of do you notice about the businesses that come in from Australia or New Zealand that are successful?
So we've actually had a multitude of suppliers coming out of Australia and New Zealand, and some of them we've been trading for like more than 40 years. There are some businesses, they understand the Pacific culture a lot better. Methodology of doing business in Pacific Islands is a little bit different to maybe Australia, New Zealand. It's all about relationships. Whoever comes from outside, they first should understand how businesses operate, who's who, and then suddenly engagement in the business will happen.
So let's say, I had some timber and I wanted to come and build a relationship with you. How would I practically go about that without sort of wasting your time?
I think like any other supplier comes, generally they either cold call or they come through some sort of a network. And if there's any good references, then, we give them time. If they are serious and they come and visit, that means we give them time.
Okay.
So the next step actually would be to do some vendor assessment from our perspective, price comparisons, and, we just talk the commercial side of things. And if it works out, then it works out. So yeah, it's not that hard to engage with us. We are fairly open.
That point that you make about the advantage that people have in actually physically coming to market, it's not a guarantee that you're going to win business, but it is a pretty important hurdle in your due diligence process. If someone's assessing their seriousness, have you bothered to come and, show up in person?
And are companies coming to you typically with a kind of proposition, or are they coming to you to say, hey, can we understand what you guys are about and what you want?
They do come with a ready for market kind of product catalog or all of these things. Very less, it's from my experience, has been that they come to just in general sense and then they want to engage.
And how actively do you go internationally looking for products and looking for sourcing?
We have a rotation system, but on a average once a year, some team members will certainly be, whether it's China Canton Fair, somewhere in Europe or Malaysia, or there are these fairs which are, we call it buying fairs. And that is actually very important because, then you are literally getting an exposure to what's latest in the market. And then that's what we can bring to the Fiji market. We do surveys of what the market requires, and then we'll approach some of the suppliers who are good partners with us.
We're coming towards the end of the Talanoa now, but wondering about the road ahead. Fiji's gone through a pretty significant period of growth over the last few years. So what does the future look like for you guys, strategically over the next little while? A bit of a splash about Bunnings and others coming into Fiji. Where do you see, I guess, the competitive advantage?
I think, we had a few strategy sessions where we looked at who is Vinod Patel Group and how do we place ourselves over here. Fiji, for starters, actually, we will keep on investing. Currently, we have about 3 projects in the pipeline where we are expanding our stores, Even if we, like, for example, Nandi is coming up. We just finished Lambasa. We launched it in February. The next one is Nandi by the end of the year. It's the same size as Suva Center Point store. And then the
Mm.
next would be looking at Nakasi, which is also a big box concept. And then after that, probably looking at Lotoka. And then the other partially is to see how well we are placed in this entire region. Recently, we gotten back into Papua New Guinea, where we've just started a distribution model business.
And certainly when we were talking to George Constantino of the Constantino Group a couple of weeks ago, he was very optimistic about the Papua New Guinea market. We've been speaking to Atin Patel, the director of Vinod Patel Group, which is, I'm sure, very well known to many of our listeners who are also probably suppliers to or prospective suppliers to Vinod Patel Group. And if they haven't, I'm sure they'll be very interested after listening to this podcast. So, Atin, thank you very much for being both a listener to the show, but also a guest today. It's been a pleasure to have you on the Pesanesi podcast and Vinaka Makalil.
Thank you for having me. It was absolutely wonderful. I was always in the listening end, but I'm inside it now.
Well, what a great guy, Dave. And we didn't show it on the Talanoa, but it looked like afterwards he was very generous with the morning tea that he brought out for you.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's just say I was very well fed throughout the week, but certainly the traditional level of hospitality, not just at Vinod Patel Group, but pretty much any corporate meeting or other meeting that you go to in Fiji, there's always a very generously catered morning tea or lunch, and that was no exception. But great to catch up with him, wasn't it?
It was, and the breadth of that business is quite stunning, really, isn't it? And the size and breadth, even not just the product ranges and the sectors they're in, but also I had not realised that they were so involved in Australia, New Zealand, and across other countries in the Pacific. The family nature of the business is always a really interesting dynamic in a business, particularly when it starts to get to that size. But obviously, still, highly involved in the community, very conscious of their role within the community and of giving back. And interesting to hear his take on relationships as well, which, is a theme that keeps coming through everybody we talk to who's been successful in the Pacific.
I think Atin gave a very good piece of context to that. It's not everything. Obviously, you've got to have a quality product, and there are kind of more sophisticated ways that you can put yourself on the radar over time, and if you are a business that's interested in supplying. But he did make that point that they get, like I'm sure any business does, just constantly bombarded with approaches and requests and all of that sort of online connection that you would get. However, it's a really simple and a straightforward way to filter whether someone's serious or not about supplying the market. If they've bothered to get on a plane, if they've bothered to come over to not just spruik their product or their service or their own business, but to learn enough so that it can serve it better. That speaks volumes, I think, to a business located in the Pacific about how serious a business from outside might be. A lot of people would know the Vinod Patel Home and Living store, or they might know the hardware business, or some of the construction material supply, but also I think the export, influence that they have across the region. Very significant business, and one that I think has kind of managed quite well to, in my view, to juggle that, the opportunities and challenges of being a multi-generational family business. I think that point that Atin made about the need for discipline, about the need to kind of balance family dynamics with real serious corporate discipline is quite a telling example about how to succeed in that context.
Yeah, I think the other thing to mention, Dave, is after we'd stopped recording, our team talked a little bit more to us about how they're expanding outside of Fiji. And I was quite impressed with how they're thinking about using e-commerce as part of that expansion, as well as online finance programs to, help people be able to get financing for projects online and very simply.
Yeah, it's definitely been a big feature of the Vinod Patel business. I think over the last few years, they've invested quite heavily in the e-commerce platforms and experiences that they have to offer. And one of those points that Atin mentioned was certainly they are starting to see a little bit of competitive pressure coming in with the announcement like Bunnings coming into Fiji through its Bunnings Pacific. That's using one of their competitors, I suppose, as a supply chain partner. And he was still pretty confident. I think that the investment that Vinod Patel Group has put into its online offering, together with its network across the country of bricks and mortar stores, should see it in a relatively strong position, but it's something that they certainly can't afford to keep napping on.
Yeah, and just it sort of also supports one of the things that we've talked about quite a lot over the recent weeks, a bit about digital connectivity across the Pacific and how that continues to improve. And I did note this week just gone that there was, I think Fiji Telecom sponsored the Pacific Fibre Conference. I'm not sure whether it was in Suva or Nandi, but and that was all about digital connectivity and the use of artificial intelligence across the region. So, don't know while you've been in Fiji, Dave, whether you bumped into anybody who'd been part of that.
Yeah, it was certainly happening in Fiji while we were there. That was happening in Nandi, but I did see a lot of references to it in the newspapers. But you're right, Glenn. That's another big emerging theme that's happening in the Pacific. It explains a lot about the rise of data centers that you're seeing in Fiji and elsewhere. Certainly over the last couple of weeks, I've been aware of a couple of other potential new cable projects that are looking at basing themselves in and out of Fiji, certainly en route to Australia and New Zealand. And I think improving that data connectivity is going to be a huge plank in the next few years and decade maybe of Fiji and the Pacific's development. And certainly everyone in Fiji is extremely data literate. Maybe a little advertorial for one of our upcoming guests. We're going to be joined by Chandan Ori, who is the president of Business Process Outsourcing BPO Outsource Fiji. And his business, Duco Consulting, has made a very significant feature of its business, that idea of using that data connection to support outsource-based services businesses in Fiji, and just opened a new office in Papua New Guinea. So I think that does show you some of the potential that greater data connectivity can add into the economics of the region.
Dave, and we talked a little bit about your trip to Fiji in the intro, but just wondering if there's anything else that you've picked up while you've been there that you want to share with us as we close out the Talanoa.
Yeah, well, certainly. I mean, there's always a lot happening in Fiji. It really is we talk a lot about it on the show, and I think for good reason. It really is an economic and political centre of a lot of activity that's happening in the Pacific. While I was there, catching up with colleagues at the New Zealand High Commission, of course, the thing that they were all very busy with is the Pacific Island Foreign Ministers meeting, which is taking place this week in Suva on Thursday and Friday. What's probably the last and highest level meeting that'll take place before leaders will get together in Palau at the end of this month. Of course, Fiji, like New Zealand and like the Cook Islands in a week or so, is gearing up for an election either later this year or early next year. And so there's sort of a lot of speculation starting about the general kind of politicking and what that means. But of course, for a country that has, I think, this current government under Prime Minister Rambuka, it's sort of the first peaceful transition of power that Fiji has had, certainly in its modern history, is quite something to get to the end of a full electoral cycle. And so really interesting to see what comes next. And I guess just other observations would be really we had a drive from Suva to Nandi, and I always love doing that Queens Road drive. You and I have done it a couple of times, Glenn, and you get a really good sense of what's happening outside of Suva. And I was quite struck, I think, by the level of investment, just in new buildings, new businesses, new kind of giant new warehousing developments, new cold stores, these sorts of things going in, especially in that, when you hit the outer Nandi kind of area and that Nandi back road, you're really starting to see some very significant investment, and even all the way along the Coral Coast as well. And I think that just shows you how much the economy has grown, and certainly how much potential the local business community see in its future growth.
Very good. And of course, we also saw the announcement about the new Dewar coach this week. Wasn't quite who I expected it was going to be, but still looks like they've got a solid appointment as the new coach there.
Yeah, exactly. You had a hot tip, but it didn't prove to be. I'm glad we didn't break that one on the show. certainly some great names in there, and I'm sure a lot of excitement about Brad Moore, the new Fijian Drua coach, and well, look, let's see what the next season has in store. I see, for our listeners' benefit, you are wearing your Drua Matabubale members cap, kindly gifted to you by our friend Josefa Vanuata at the Drua. So really thinking of them and looking forward to next season.
Yeah, exactly. And then just while we're talking about people who've been on our show in the past, Dave, also note in relation to having Agnès Bacalant on our show the other week, an announcement that France is funding 50 new infrastructure and development projects around recovery in New Caledonia. So a total or an announced total of 84.7 million euro going into that. So that sounds pretty exciting and good timing in terms of the group that's going up, the delegation that's going up to French Polynesia and New Caledonia shortly.
Yeah, absolutely. If anyone else needed another reason to jump on board or consider that delegation after featuring them on the podcast, well, that's another, what would you say, 84 million reasons to look into that opportunity. So, of course, New Caledonia is still rebuilding after a very, very intense period of political unrest a couple of years ago. But of course, the flip side, of course, to that connection that they have with France is the availability of very, very large reserves of potential investment capital. And so a lot of that is going into that rebuild. And as part of that, a bit of a focus on the energy transition. So a lot of opportunity there in the French Pacific if anyone needed a reminder.
Yeah, and the other reference back to one of our previous guests is I noted that the Niue government, along with the Niue Development Bank, headed by our friend of the show Jesse, announced a further deal with Kiwi Bank in New Zealand and announcing some new savings products that they're making available in Niue.
They do have, as he mentioned, the Kiwi Bank connection within the Niue Development Bank, so it is really, really cool to see that happening. And I think on the subject of kind of development banks across the region and that sort of larger scale institutional investment community, caught up with another friend of the show and another friend of ours, Mike Nathola from BSP Life, and our listeners from the absolute start of the show might remember, in fact, it was the last episode we recorded while I was in Adelaide, and that was back before Christmas with Craig Strong, the Chief Investment Officer of BSP Life. But it was great to catch up with Mike and just talk about some of the real investment that BSP Life is doing in Fiji, but also I think some of the growing interest in collaboration across the Pacific through those institutional capital funders. BSP Life is one, but of course you've got all of the sovereign wealth funds, the Provident Fund out of Fiji, similar ones in Vanuatu, Cook Islands, and elsewhere, and they will all be meeting at the end of August for their annual get-together. That'll be happening in Fiji. And, I'm sure some really, really interesting conversations going on there about the potential for closer collaboration, both in terms of their intellectual, but also their investment capital across the region. So I think we can stay tuned for some pretty interesting developments in that sector as well.
Yeah, fascinating. Hey, and Dave, on the not so good news, you were telling me just before we started recording that an old friend of both of ours recently passed away, so a bit of sad news, and just acknowledging the life and times of Nigel Bickle. And I don't think I've told you this before, Dave, but I first met Nigel on a trade delegation many years ago, and I had to do the health and safety briefing every morning on that trade delegation, and just to lighten things up because everybody was bleary-eyed and trying to, have their first coffee of the morning, I would typically start by roasting our CEO, Pete Crisp, making fun of something he'd done the day before. And what I recall is that Nigel was my constant source of fodder for that roasting. Nigel always had noticed something that he'd come up to me beforehand and say, "Oh, did you know that Pete got his luggage delivered at 2:00 in the morning and he opened the door without any clothes on?" And whether it was true or not didn't really matter. But Nigel was great fun, a great guy and great fun.
Really want to acknowledge, I think, the very sad news that I saw just online. earlier today while I was travelling before this recording that Nigel Bickle had passed away. So I should give him his full title. Of course, is To'osavili Nigel Bickle. He has the Matai title bestowed on him by the Potasi village in the southern part of Upolu in Samoa. And, that is in reflection, I think, of the very important role and connection that he has played in a couple of different iterations. So, of course, Nigel was at one point for a few years actually the head of Immigration New Zealand, very, very involved with the Regional Seasonal Employer Scheme, the RSE scheme that New Zealand has, which has a very, very huge impact in the Pacific. And then latterly as the CEO of the Hastings District Council, which of course, big fruit growing region in Hawke's Bay in New Zealand, has a very strong connection to, well, the Pacific generally, but very specifically to that Potasi village, which is a major sender of people and benefits incredibly, well, both sides really benefit from that arrangement. And Nigel and I spent a week together in Samoa back in, gosh, it would have been 2023 or 23. And while we were there, we had the pleasure of seeing the Matai ceremony for Sandra Hazelhurst, who was at the time the mayor of Hastings. And Nigel was there, and so Sandra was also receiving the To'osavili title, and that's where I got to spend a few days, and really lucky to see the mana that Nigel brought, and not just to the New Zealand delegation, but to the whole connection between Samoa and New Zealand. And I know the news of his passing will be met with great sadness, I think, across not just the Hawke's Bay but also the broader Pacific. So moe mai rā, Nigel, and huge condolences to his family and to the Hastings community as well.
Yeah. Okay. So Dave, it's hard to kind of go from that sad note into thinking about the week ahead. But what have we got coming up? You're going to be in Adelaide for most of the week or all of the week?
I will be in Adelaide, all of the week. So just really reconnecting with the family back here. I'll still be online and still be dialing in and keeping close tabs on everything that's happening in the region. And we should also acknowledge this, Glenn, of just wrapped up your career with NZTE, and I just want to acknowledge the awesome career and all of the tributes that we've seen online and I'm sure in person for you as well. And I guess I'll be looking ahead to a couple of weeks when I go through the same experience myself.
Yes, indeed. It is a sort of funny time, but as I said to my daughter, I had farewell drinks last Thursday night, and she said to me, "Oh, how did it go, Dad?" And I said, "Well, there were really nice people in the room saying nice things to me, and I was having a couple of beers. So how could I have not enjoyed that?"
It was really cool for me, really, to see from afar, just some of those messages coming in from all over the world about the people and the businesses whose lives you've touched directly, and I'm sure you'll remain in very close touch with all of them. And we've got the great opportunity to keep doing that through the podcast. So, I was the only one, I think, who didn't actually have to say farewell, because I knew we'd be talking today and hopefully many more weeks into the future.
Yes, I certainly did appreciate your comment on the electronic card, Dave. Starting with a kia ora, pula, kia orana, talofa malo elei. Loved it. Anyway, Dave, on that note, this brings us to the end of this week's Tūpālangi in a Piece and Easy pod. Do you want to read us out?
Absolutely, Glenn. It's been another fantastic week in the Pacific, and a great reminder why we love working in this incredible region so much. It was fantastic to reconnect with so many people in Fiji, and it's just been awesome to have had all of the connection online as well through our various social media channels, and seeing a lot of the friends of the show dialing in to wish Glenn all the best as he moves into the next chapter, and also connecting with me in the same way. You can, of course, continue to keep in touch through all of our social media channels. LinkedIn, of course, is the main one that we use, but stay tuned for a few exciting developments on that front in the coming weeks. Our best way, of course, to get in touch with us at the moment is through our dedicated email address, tu.palagi, Palagi, @gmail.com. It's fantastic to be hearing from everyone about how much you're enjoying enjoying the show, but also to get ideas about people and organizations and dynamics and trends that you'd like us to focus on in future episodes. We're loving hearing from all of you, and we're really hoping to be able to incorporate some of those great ideas into the future. However, in the meantime, that has been a Tū Palangi in a Pesanesi pod for the week ending 3rd of August.